Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit today about the idea that periodization is really just coaching voodoo. And that is a quote from my friend Alex Viada. I heard him say that once or saw him write it, and thought it was funny because it makes sense. It makes sense to me as a coach, someone who's done this a long time, someone who's seen all the wide variety of research on this topic, has used all these types of periodization, is familiar with them. I'm going to tend to agree that periodization itself literally does nothing to improve gains itself directly. It really doesn't. And people like to use it for a whole host of reasons, but it generally came out of the 3 week blocks having to do with the drug cycles of Soviet bloc lifters and stuff with their orals. That is kind of your origins of periodization. And then everyone assumed, the periodization is what was working for all those lifters. Now, the reality is when we start looking at different types of periodization, nonlinear periodization, what it is just a systematic way of organizing your big exercises in terms of rep ranges. Well, part of the problem with this idea is that a lot of lifts, you're generally just better staying with certain rep ranges. In other words, some of your big barbell lifts, squats and deadlifts, probably not the best exercises in the world to be doing over 8 reps with. Right? They're extremely fatiguing. They wear you out. If anything, there is actually a higher injury rate among things like linear periodization, especially with really strong lifters. But you have that, and then you start thinking in terms of smaller movements. You don't want to be doing a laying tricep extension for sets of 4 to 5. So people are like, well, I do. I'm like, yeah, how long are you going to keep that up? I wouldn't even want to do it for a 3 week block. That's something you might test as a one-off, to assess your strength or to show off for the camera. You don't really want to train that way, right? So there's a lot of exercises that are just geared towards higher and lower reps. But the reality is there's no real evidence that any of this builds more muscle and that you go through these different phases. This was like Westside was the exact opposite of that. They're like, we just train all these systems at once so that they don't detrain. Because that's the whole problem with the idea of periodization is detraining these different energy systems. But here's the thing, guys. With a lot of it, it really is just voodoo. It is there, but it's coaching trickery. Okay? It's there as coaching trickery. Okay? Which means it's just to convince lifters or coaches really smart. And again, I'm speaking as someone who is very familiar historically with how linear periodization breaks down and the way the blocks are written and why a lot of coaches believe they work. So I'm not coming from this, this is just too complicated. No, I'm saying as someone who's worked with it a lot in the past, researched it heavily, knows lifters who do it, coaches who do it, it really is just a mind trick being played on your lifters. And the same thing with a lot of programming we do. It's just there so that when your lifters gain muscle, all of a sudden they're stronger. And they're like, aha, the periodization worked. No, you just continued to train decently and you got bigger. You gained muscle. Of course your lifts went up. And a lot of it's a distraction. And I've done this in the past. And let me give away a secret I've used in the past. I don't do stuff like this anymore. I just don't have time for it. I don't have time for this BS with my lifters. I need them to just do what I tell them to do. And we just get bigger and stronger all the time. But I used to do some of the mind games like that. And I'll give you a perfect example. So we would take a main lift. We would take something like a bench press. Okay, let's say were kind of stuck. So what would we do with the bench press? All right, we're doing that 3 sets of 3, right? But we're doing a weight that maybe you could have got one more rep. Right, we got about 1 rep in reserve. So 3 sets of 3. Next week, we might go to 4 sets of 3. The next week, 5 sets of 3. Okay? Then what do we do? Well, then we might add weight, or we might try to go 3 sets of 4. Then the next week, 4 sets of 4. The next week, 5 sets of 4. Well, now we're getting somewhere. And we could take that same weight. You see where we're about to go with this? Do the same thing. 3 sets of 5, 4 sets of 5, 5 sets of 5. That's now taken us 9 weeks. 9 weeks. Okay. Now everyone's like, oh, well, the progressive overload is there. It clearly, and after that 9th week, if everything's good, maybe test something, and then we can add weight. Maybe go back to a 3x3 with a little more weight. Like, oh man, that's brilliant. It's progressive overload. And in the meantime, we were doing incline benches for reps and tricep extensions and other stuff, right? So let's say we take a lifter and in addition to that, they're doing some other chest work, right? We're doing incline benching, maybe some dumbbells for chest, and then we're doing tricep extensions, doing rope press downs, whatever. So doing back work. See where I'm about to go with this? We're doing a bunch of sets of 10 plus on this other stuff, like maybe 8 to 12, 8 to 15. And they're getting bigger from it, right? Or are they getting bigger from all the incline and the triceps and everything? Of course they are. Pecs and triceps are growing. So in the meantime, we've had 9 solid weeks of hypertrophy from all this other work. But we make it look like the magic was in that progressive overload on the big lifts, that on the bench press, and then all of a sudden they hit a PR on week 10 or stronger. Well, no, we had 10 solid weeks of muscle growth. Okay? So you want to see where we're going with this? We act like all this programming on these big lifts. Well, let's say you run a 12-week block of some linear periodization. Well, yeah, you're going to gain some muscle from that for sure. But was that really where you got all of it? No. It's your other supplemental work. You know, you might be doing that with squats, right? We might be running a 12-week 12-week periodized block with 3-week blocks, so 4 mesocycles at 3 weeks, right? We run 12 weeks. Oh man, we're changing the rotating rep ranges and everything on those squats. But in the meantime, what else are we doing? We're doing some leg presses and some good mornings. You know, building our hamstrings, maybe doing some hip thrusts or something. All right, so what are we doing? We're getting our quads, glutes, hamstrings, or adductors, everything bigger through this other hypertrophy work too. Lo and behold, then if they get a PR, it must have been the periodization. That's what did it. Coaches worked magic. It wasn't all those sets of leg presses and good mornings and hamstring curls and hip thrusts that they did for the 12 weeks. That had nothing to do with all that hypertrophy work, right? It was all that magical periodization on the squat. No, they just got bigger.